Alright, hello. So I'm making this video to show you one way, the way I use to quickly rebuild a Kayfun or a Kayfun clone atomizer. Now there are many ways to do this, and there are almost so many ways that I can't tell you, but this is the way that I do it using rolled cotton from CVS and Kanthal wire and the whole 9 yards. So the first thing we'll want to do is disassemble our Kayfun and drain it. So we take it off. And I have my juice bottle here. I reclaim my juice before we build. And I take it apart at the top cap. So as we take it off here, and then I'll be pouring the juice back in my bottle here so I can reclaim it. Okay, so now that we have this done, we're going to just essentially take the tank off, and wouldn't I know it, it's on real tight. Once you have it apart, just start, take a paper towel here and start taking each part you take off, just dry it off a little bit, wipe it clean. Now, if it's been a while since you've done this, you'll want to rinse these in water. But this one was rebuilt recently, so I'm just going to dry it out a little bit. One other thing I forgot to add is you probably want to wash your hands really well before you start, because if you have anything on your hands, it might give your atomizer a funky flavor for the first hour or so that you use it. So make sure you stay clean, and you won't get any of those off flavors. So now that we've taken the chimney off, and we're down to the vaporization chamber here, the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to unscrew this and take it off, and we'll set it aside. One little neat tip that you can do is if you take the top cap and you pull your drip tip out, it makes a nice little stand for working with. So as you see here, this is a used wick and coil. It's not too terribly bad, but it's time to be replaced, so I'm going to use this as the demo. Now, if the coil isn't completely carboned up, you can just remove the wick and replace the wick. But this one's pretty, it's got some carbon buildup on it, so we're going to take it off. I'll show you how I would take the wick out without damaging the coil, though. So what I do is I take some thrum scissors, which are available at any hobby store or a bunch of places online, and I just cut right down the edge of one side of the coil, and then you can just gently pop out the old wick without terribly damaging your coil. So in this case, I'm going to show you how to wind the coil, so we're going to take it off too. So make sure you're using screwdrivers that are the appropriate size for these screws, otherwise you can strip them out, and they'll last a lot longer if you use the right size screwdriver. So there we go, we've pulled our old coil off and we're down to the bare deck and we're ready to build. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our new piece of wire and we're going to anneal it. So I am using 30 gauge round Kanthal. I find it's the best compromise between having a nice robust piece of wire in there and then still having it heat up quickly. So you can use different gauges of wire. This is all down to personal preference, but I prefer 30 in a Kayfun. And we're going to snap off I don't know, a few inches, 3 or 4 inches of wire here. Now when this wire comes off the spool, it's going to be real springy, and when you bend it, it's not going to want to stay and it'll spring back. So what I do before I start winding is I anneal the wire, and you can grab it with a pair of pliers, or you can grab it with I'm using hemostats, or you can use tweezers, whatever you happen to have online or laying around, and you just take a lighter and heat it until it's red, and then just slowly walk down the wire. Now this heating it and allowing it to cool slowly makes the wire softer and less springy. And like I said, this process is called annealing. Anybody who's done machine shop work will recognize that term. Okay, so now that we've annealed the wire, it'll turn kind of a grayish instead of the silver it was, and it'll be much easier to work with. Now the next thing is we're going to be doing a microcoil build here, what's referred to as a microcoil, and this is a coil where all the coils are touching each other. I prefer on a Kayfun to have my microcoils be between 2 and 2.5 millimeters in diameter. And I found that a really common thing you can use as a guide to wrap your coil is a Q-tip, because Q-tip is about 2.5 millimeters in diameter. So if you take your Q-tip and just cut the head right off of it there, watch it go flying across the room, this makes a nice little guide to wrap your coil. We'll cut the ends off, and I actually have even used the cotton of the Q-tip to do this build, although we'll be using rolled cotton today. So the next thing you want to do is give yourself a little bit of room for a lead, and we are going to wrap, I prefer 5 wraps, and this will give us about 1.7, 1.8 ohms on the Kayfun. So you'll hold it and then just start wrapping it and letting them sit right along each other. That's 2, 3, 4, 5. And when you come back around on the 5th wrap, you want to make sure that the leads are leading off of the coil in opposite directions on the same side, and preferably on the bottom here. So what that does is you see that after we anneal the wire, it's sitting pretty close together right there. We'll fix that and make that look prettier in the end, but the key is both leads are coming off the same side, and it's ready to go. So we just slide our coil right off, and so I have a little bit of too much wire here, so I'm going to cut this off. Now I'm using these little diagonal cutters. You can also use nail clippers. They work just fine, although I prefer the diagonal cutters. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set our coil in between the screws. Now, I think this is very important, and I don't think a lot of people cover this. I prefer the wrap to go clockwise around the screw. That way, as the screw tightens, it's going to be pulling tighter on the wires instead of loosening it up. And I've seen a lot of people get frustrated by trying to wrap these counterclockwise around the screw. So you'll notice that if you set the coil right over the air intake, it will, the leads will sit perfectly aligned to go clockwise around the screw. So you don't have to excuse me, I normally do this with much more dexterity, but I'm working around the camera here. So set the coil right over the screw and then just bend it right around, and then we turn it around and we do exactly the same thing on the other side. And you'll want to make that fairly snug. So now what we have is we have the coil sitting right over the air hole, and it's wrapped clockwise around both screws, and now we're just going to tighten those down gently. You don't have to get real insanely tight with them right here in the beginning, but we're just going to snug them up in order to hold everything in place so we can make our adjustments. Okay, we're looking really nice here. So once you've got them snugged down, you can go ahead and trim off these tags to get them out of the way. Okay, and now our coil is looking nice. See how it's almost right perfectly in the center. We'll move that in a second. So at this point I feel confident I can go ahead and tighten these down a little bit. Once again, these don't have to be incredibly tight, but they do have to make good electrical contact, so make them snug. Now that they're snug down and we're good to go, what you want to do is just gently move the coil to where it's centered above the air hole, and you'll want to lift it a little bit to make sure it's not touching the deck, because that's where you'll get a short. And once you have it centered and everything looks good, you can just withdraw the guide rod. And you'll want to do this gently so you don't mess up your coil. It's awful close to touching the deck, so I'm going to give it a little more lift. There we go. I don't know how well this camera is going to pick that up, but if you see the leads go to the screws, but they don't touch the deck, and it's sitting directly, like a millimeter or two above the air inlet. Okay, we look good there. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to finish the coil by heating it and making sure that it heats properly. So you want to screw it onto your device the way it is, and the first thing you just want to check your resistance. So however your device checks your resistance, we have 1.6 ohms. I expected between 1.6 and 1.8, so we're right on the money there. So I have the device set at 15 watts, and you don't want to burn this for a long time at that, because it'll burn the wire right in two, but we're just going to heat it a little bit with just a little pulse. And you notice how the coil starts heating from the center and gently comes to the outside. That's exactly the way you want to see it. That's perfect. So now we're just going to make sure, see how the coils are not perfectly sitting together. We're just going to fix that. But you never want to short across this while you have power on it. So what you'll do is you'll heat it and you'll let off, and then you'll squeeze it a little bit. Until you get that coil perfectly aligned. And there you go. That's what your coil needs to look like. One more little squeeze there. And there we go. And now we're ready to go ahead and put our wick in. So watch it, because that's going to be hot. We're just going to remove it from our device and put it back on our little stand here. Now you can use almost any source of cotton. You don't want to use anything with any dyes in it or any residual chemicals from the factory. I prefer rolled cotton from CVS. It's sterile, it comes in a pack, and the nice thing is about it, when you cut it off this roll, it comes off in these nice little flakes, and it's really easy to work with. So I'll pull off a flake see it's layered. I pull off a few layers, and this is what I'm going to be using to make our wick today. So I take my thumb scissors here. These are really handy, but you can use any kind of scissors as long as they're sharp. And I'm going to cut off some. Now this amount you will have to experiment with, because it varies by how thick the flake that you took off is and a bunch of other stuff. Over time, you'll just get a feeling for how much of this you should peel off. Now, we're going to roll it, but I don't want you to twist it. I don't want you to hold one end and twist the other. What you're going to do is you're going to roll it between your fingers. And gently, as you go down, roll it into somewhat of a cylinder here. If you twist it, it's not going to have as good of wicking action, so you just want to kind of roll it. Alright, and once you have it rolled, we're going to wet one end of it, just a drop with juice on the end. And this will help you compact and start through the... So we put just a drop on the end, and we're going to roll. And that'll give us a nice little point so we can stick it right through the coil there. Now at this point you actually do kind of twist it a little bit. But we don't want to keep twisting it. We're just trying to twist it down to where it gets small enough to where it'll easily slide in the coil there. And you want to find a place in this where it's snug, but it's not tight. It needs to make sure that you have good surface area contact of the wick on the wire, but yet it's not so tight that the juice can't wick through. And I think I found a pretty good spot there. So now my wick is installed. Next we have to trim it to the right length. So what I do is I lay this out and I look straight down, and you need to leave about 1 millimeter or 2 on either side of the diameter of the atomizer. So just about 1 millimeter extra on each side, and trim it off. And this will be our final wick. And to test this, the wick is going to sit right on this base, but we don't want it to block these juice channels. So we bend it and set it along the bottom of that base. And see, that's just about the right length. There should be a little puff right there, but not a whole lot of extra. So in order to wrangle this and keep this in line, we're going to start wetting this wick down with juice. So just take the juice you plan to use in it and start wetting down the wick. And then you can use a toothpick, or if you have a long tip bottle like I do, you can just kind of mash it, not hard, but just kind of gently pat it against the side of the deck, making sure that we don't block this juice channel, because this is where the juice is going to come up to feed it. If you block that, you're going to get dry hits and it's not going to work very well. You also want to make sure you don't go around the edges, because as the chamber comes on here, we don't want to see it caught in the threads. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. We'll wet him down a little bit. And then we'll just set it right on the deck there. And see how it kind of sticks in the finger, but we're going to use the toothpick or the tip of the bottle to make sure it's touching the deck but not blocking the other juice channel as well. So from the top, this is what you'll look like. You'll see the 2 puffs, and those 2 puffs there on the side is where the juice will collect, and that'll be your reservoir for each drag you're taking. And the bottom part of the wick is what draws the juice up after it comes out of the channels into those 2 puffs, which are our reservoirs. So now we will gently put the chamber back on and screw them all the way down. Now these things should be snug, but you don't have to go crazy when you tighten them. Avoid over-tightening if possible. And now we'll look back down the combustion chamber. Now see, the threads have kind of caught one side of it and moved it around, and that's okay. We'll fix that. You just, once again, you take your toothpick and you'll straighten it out. And then I push right down the middle and make sure I can feel the juice channel there to where it's not blocked. But the wick, of course, should be touching the deck. And there we go, and that's going to be about perfect. The next thing we'll do is we'll take and put our chimney on. There we go. And now the tank. And as I stated before, don't over tighten these. Everything is sealed here with O-rings, so it's just got to be snug to where it doesn't come loose. It doesn't have to be incredibly tight. And then your top cap, you want to make sure that inside your top cap that your O-ring is in place and is going to make a seal around the chimney. There you go. And your device is fully assembled again. Now we can go ahead and fill it and test it. I use a number 1, this is a number 1, Phillips screwdriver bit. This is convenient to carry in your pocket for refilling. And when you fill, with the atomizer upside down, you want to fill to the top of the window. And you want to leave that little bit of air gap in the top, because without that air gap it will not feed properly. So let's go ahead and fill our atomizer. And there, it's full. And you have successfully built your Kayfun clone atomizer. Now this could work on a regular Kayfun. This is a Kayfun Light Plus clone. There are many different styles, but all of them basically build the same. So this is how you build the Kayfun, and good luck, and I hope it works out well for you.